Hello everybody, I am Chris Baker from LuckyGunner.com, and this is finally part 2 of our series on the 5.7x28mm cartridge. Last time we looked at the history of the cartridge and ballistic gel tests of a couple of the most common loads. We also reviewed some feedback from military and law enforcement who have actually used 5.7 in the field. The gel test results did not inspire much confidence, and the end users have not been too impressed either. But if you take a second look at those accounts, they're often comparing the performance of 5.7 with the P90 submachine gun to short-barreled 5.56 carbines. 5.7 was originally designed to replace 9mm, not rifle cartridges, so clearly 5.56 is a better round ballistically. That doesn't necessarily mean 5.7 is useless. So today we're going to look at more gel test results to see if some of the newer 5.7 loads can draw better performance out of this cartridge. We're not expecting rifle level performance, but we can at least definitively answer the question of whether 5.7 really is just overpriced 22 Magnum. As a quick reminder, I am deliberately setting aside the armor-piercing potential of 5.7 for this discussion. I realize that is a major appeal of this cartridge for some folks, but for most of us, it's just not relevant for personal protection. Violent criminals with body armor are an extraordinarily rare threat for the average citizen in the US, at least for now. We have used the FBI 4-layer heavy clothing barrier on all of our gel tests, otherwise the gelatin is unarmored. The gel test results we looked at last time were for 2 common loads produced by FN. We tested them both with 3 different test guns. Only one of the tests met the 12-inch minimum penetration standard set by the FBI for service cartridges, and it just barely passed. That was the SS-197 VMAX load when fired from the 5.7 pistol. The rest penetrated to around 9 to 10 inches. We've seen 22 long rifle loads that can do better than that, so surely 5.7 has got to be capable of better terminal performance than what we've seen so far. So now we have 4 additional loads to look at. The 40-grain Spear Gold Dot Jacketed Hollow Point, a highly regarded name in self-defense ammo across all calibers, but they just started making a 5.7 load in the last couple of years. Then we have loads from smaller manufacturers, the Vanguard Outfitters 36-grain GPM. This is a copper bullet that's designed to open up and fragment. Also from Vanguard is the Black Fang Obsidian Dragon, a 34-grain solid copper bullet. It does not deform or expand, but according to the manufacturer, it, quote, tends to crush bones and disrupt organs. And finally, a load that has become almost mythical among 5.7 fans, the Elite Ammunition T6B. This is made in very small batches and is known for being difficult to acquire. It's another solid copper bullet, and this one has a tip that's designed to separate from the base on impact. Let's start with the Gold Dot test results. On the right, we've got a photo of the first shot fired from each of our 3 test guns with the wound channel and temporary cavity highlighted. On the left are the average depth, diameter, and velocity of the 5 rounds fired from each barrel. Gold Dot performed well out of the 5.7 pistol with an average depth of 15 inches. Each bullet also expanded consistently to about 0.31 inches. Unfortunately, with the 10 and 16-inch barrels, we got a repeat of what we saw with the VMAX load in our last video. Too much velocity caused them to expand too quickly, so they did not penetrate past 10 inches. The Vanguard GPM bullet did more or less what it's advertised to do. The 4 petals opened up and sheared away from the bullet, leaving a small core to penetrate. The little pieces lack the energy for any serious wounding potential on their own. The average penetration of the core was around 14 inches for all 3 barrels, which is not bad, but the core is only about half the mass of the original bullet. So now you're depending on this little 20-grain bullet fragment to incapacitate the target. That is the equivalent of a single pellet of number 4 buckshot. The marketing copy for the Vanguard Black Fang Obsidian Dragon makes it sound like it creates a temporary cavity with significant wounding potential. For all 3 barrels, the maximum height of the temp cavity was right around 2.7 inches. That really needs to be closer to about 4 inches before we can really rely on the temp cavity to have any immediate effect on the target. In any case, we do at least get sufficient penetration with this load with all 3 barrels and 100% weight retention. The Elite T6B performed a lot like the Vanguard GPM load, just with a bit more penetration. It was between about 16 and 18 inches. The tip did break off and separate in all of our tests, leaving the core to penetrate. Like the GPM load, those bullet cores each weigh about 20 grains. The temporary cavities here were somewhat long, but not especially wide or tall. So looking at these 4 loads plus the 2 we tested last time, the clear choice for a handgun appears to be the Speer Gold Dot. For the longer barrels, I don't think there's a big winner. None of the loads had both penetration and expansion with the 10 and 16 inch barrels. That's not to say there's no 5.7 load out there that can do it, we just haven't seen one yet. At the higher velocities, I suspect you would need a heavier bullet to get better penetration when they expand. Out of these 6 loads, I would probably go with the Black Fang since it penetrates with full weight retention, but you don't need a special boutique load if all you're looking for is penetration. Plain old 40 grain Federal American Eagle full metal jacket penetrates just fine. It may not punch through body armor, but it does penetrate gel. Now, we haven't formally tested this load, so I don't have any photos for you, but we fired a few rounds in our used gel blocks, and it does sail right through 2 full 16-inch blocks. It even has a little temporary cavity like most of these other loads. Now, that's not all that surprising. A lot of FMJ ammo performs that way, like, for instance, 22 Magnum. So, is 5.7 basically just overpriced 22 Magnum? We looked at the numbers last time, and in terms of velocity and bullet weight, they're only equal if we compare 5.7 from a pistol to 22 Magnum from a rifle. If we compare rifles to rifles, 5.7 has between 12 and 25% more velocity than 22 Magnum. Comparing pistols to pistols, the velocity gap is roughly double that. But as we've seen, it looks like the designers of 5.7 ammo are having a tough time getting that extra velocity from the longer barrels to actually do anything productive, except maybe penetrate soft body armor. If we wanted to know whether 5.7 is truly better than 22 Magnum on an unarmored target, we'd also have to perform all these gelatin tests with 22 Magnum. We'd have to do it with 3 different barrels and at least a handful of different loads. So that's what we did. Our test guns, a Smith & Wesson M&P, a Kel-Tec CMR 30 10-inch SBR, and a 16-inch CMR 30. We tested 5 different loads. We've got the CCI 40 grain Maxi Mag total metal jacket, then the jacketed hollow point version of that same load, another Speer Gold Dot, a 30 grain VMAX from Hornady, and the Remington 40 grain jacketed soft point. I won't draw this one out. Let's jump right to the full results. There is a lot of shallow penetration here. Some of that is by design. 22 Magnum is often used to hunt small game, and you don't need deep penetration for that purpose. 4 of the 5 loads got past the 12-inch mark when fired from a pistol, but only because they did not expand or deform. The Gold Dot expanded, but only made it to 11 inches. It got an extra 300 feet per second with the SBR barrel, but penetrated less than 10 inches. The 5.7 Gold Dot at an almost identical velocity got to 15 inches with expansion. That's a great example of how bullet design matters just as much as mass and velocity. Like we saw with 5.7, the only 22 mag load that penetrated with the longer barrels was the one that did not expand, the CCI Maxi Mag total metal jacket. The Remington jacketed soft point has good looking numbers here at first glance, but that's only because these are the averages. If we look at the breakdown for each individual shot, you can see that performance was pretty inconsistent with the 10 and 16 inch barrels. Sometimes it expanded, sometimes it did not. Penetration was still good across the board with the 10-inch barrel. At 16 inches, we got a couple of bullets at the shallow end. There's not much of a temporary cavity to speak of with any of the 22 mag loads. They were slightly bigger with the 5.7s, maybe not big enough to force a change in behavior during a gunfight, but probably enough to make an argument for 5.7 as the superior small game cartridge. So the bottom line here, with 5.7 Gold Dot or VMAX fired out of a pistol, you can get performance similar to non-expanding 9mm or maybe 380 ACP. Otherwise, for any combination of barrel length and any one of these 11 loads, you have to pick either penetration or expansion. 22 Magnum can poke a 22 caliber hole with good penetration. 5.7 will do the same thing, but maybe with a temp cavity that looks good on camera. Now, I don't say any of that to dismiss either of these cartridges. They may not have the best ballistics, but as gun people, we often mistake non-optimal for unacceptable. And that's not always a helpful way to look at it. It's okay to settle for non-optimal if we're getting something else in return. In the case of both 5.7 and 22 Magnum, The upside of mediocre ballistics is exceptionally low recoil. Low recoil leads to better shot placement, and as long as the bullet can penetrate, shot placement usually trumps ballistics. Of course, the low recoil advantage goes a much longer way for novice shooters than it does for the highly skilled, but it always helps at least a little bit. And with a carbine, 9mm and 5.56 are already pretty easy to handle recoil-wise, even for a new shooter, so it's more of an advantage for handguns. But it is an advantage you can get from either 22 Magnum or 5.7x28. Practically speaking, the major advantage of 22 Magnum is the cost of ammo, which is typically on par with 9mm. The cost of 5.7 has dropped in recent years, but it's still about twice as much as 9. The other benefit of 22 mag is that you can get it in a super lightweight snub-nose revolver like the 11-ounce Smith & Wesson 351C. So far, the smallest gun you can get chambered for 5.7 is a full-size semi-auto. On the other hand, 5.7 is a centerfire round and therefore more reliable than a rimfire cartridge. Stacking rimmed cartridges in a magazine is always a sketchy proposition. For a semi-automatic self-defense gun, I'd personally rather rely on a 5.7 to function reliably. Reliability should be a top priority for any life-saving tool. So for that very important reason, 5.7 is more than just overpriced 22 Magnum. But I am still gonna laugh every time I see this classic meme from the archives. All right, guys, that's all I've got on 5.7 for the time being, and probably for a long while, to be honest. Hope you enjoyed it, and the next time you need some ammo, be sure to get it from us with lightning fast shipping at luckygunner.com.